Hey, we are at episode 4 of 4 talking about some rare and uncommon Hoya, at least as it stands in the US market and US collections for that matter. We have no time for long introductions. We did that in episode 1 and 2. No one's got time for that. I'm Dave. I'm the silver plant guy in Iowa City, and this is Hoya breviolata, one that used to be quite common. You could get it in garden centers, and I'm talking about a decade ago, probably, something like that. You don't hear much about it now, or at least I don't. This one gets such beautiful flowers, kind of a whitish, off-whitish corona, and then kind of red, maroonish corollas. Quite pretty. Blooms once it gets going prolifically. Prolifically? That is not a word. Prolifically is a word, however. This one's been growing, like so many of my Hoya, in the Mars Hydro Grow tent because I really wanted to give it a boost of heat and humidity. And by heat, I mean 72 degrees instead of where it would be living in our living room, which 58 at night and about 64, 65 degrees during the day. It's getting as much light as this plant would ever want right now. It's not chlorotic, but it's not as deep green as if it were getting lower light like it will be this summer. The temperature range for this plant, even for a plant that comes from the island of Sulawesi, is 45 degrees to 90 degrees. So this will not be going back in the tent after I bring it out in a couple of weeks. One, I just like looking at it. These cute little cupped leaves. Are you kidding me? It's adorable. Who would not want this in their collection? When I put the cuttings of this in the tent, I had a pot maybe about like this with vining. I don't know, as a very small plant is what I'm trying to say. You might have heard me say in episode 3 that I like to buy very small plants and grow them up in my household conditions. I just love growing plants so much. I don't want to buy full baskets of plants from Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever. I want to buy small little plants that I can enjoy growing to their full dimension. And if that means it takes longer, it takes longer. I have a lot of plants to enjoy, so if I have a whole bunch that are spending time growing up into adults, I don't mind at all. For me, that's the great fun of being an indoor gardener, quite frankly. But this one is doing exceptionally well. I mean, it's only been a few months, and we're talking about a plant that has already grown like this. So this is one that's going to go somewhere that it's going to hang. It's clearly what it wants to do. And while it has good vining, it has not been nearly as annoying a viner as many of its sisters in the tent that are wrapping themselves around anything and everything and making it impossible for me to get plants out when I need them. This has been a super fun plant. Both in and out of the tent. I'm in the tent a lot. I think many people probably have the impression that people with grow tents don't get to see their plants. I get to see them a lot. And there are so many plants in there to water that I'm in there at least 3 hours on a Sunday, 4, depending on what I'm doing. So plenty of time in there. Easy grower, my normal airy organic mix, denser than some of the other ones that I grow. That are prone to root rot. This one's giving me no trouble at all from day one. And that cannot be said about several of my plants. And that's just part of growing them up. All right, let's grab another plant. I'm gonna grab a banger for you. One moment. All right, we've got Russell up next. This is a Coco Ranch hybrid. Susan... Blanking on Susan's full name. I spent 25 years trying to drink my brains out, and now I have long COVID. It is amazing that my shoes get on the correct feet. I'm just going to put that out there. But this is a cross between Elajorum and Viola. very beautiful plant and great, easy sun stressor. This is at the back of the tent, top shelf, so very bright, but in no way is it near the bank light, which is 240 watts, dimmed to 75%, I believe. One of the benefits of Russell is that it can take very cool temperatures, lowest humidity, in that 40% range. I have to supplement our house with humidifiers because in the winter it can get down into the teens. That will kill off any new growth on vines, any new leaves, anything like that. Since I use so much supplemental lighting, my plants never stop growing. It's a year-round party for them as long as the humidity's up. But it's been very simple, just a normal airy organic mix. I water this once a week, and that's when it's thirsty. I mean, it's kind of a schedule for so many of the plants in there because they all end up at about 1 week needing to be watered. If I'm a day or two on either side of needing water, doesn't need water, it doesn't seem to matter. Unless there are a couple, 3 in there that are really fussy that I would pay attention to. Otherwise, they're getting watered. It's Sunday, except for the bottom shelf, which doesn't get as much airflow. They're going to get watered because that's when I water plants. And that doesn't work for everybody, but that is how I have the shelves built in terms of pot size, organic mix, and needs of the plant. It's built so that they all pretty much air out on those top 2 shelves at the same time. Is air out the right word? Dry out? I think you know what I mean. This is such a nice hybrid from Coco Ranch. I've seen a lot of their Carnosa hybrids. I own one called Crinkle Tinkles, I think. Honestly, a lot of the Carnosa hybrids just all look the same to me. Very slight variations. But this is obviously a very gorgeous plant. Well worth acquiring if you can find one at a reasonable price. Not super fast growing by any means. I did take a propagation of this, and it was in a beautiful 5-leaf crown, and then I dropped a Lacanosa on top of it and decapitated 3 leaves. It was a sad day. It was a sad day. But I've recovered. Please don't worry about me. Everything's fine. This little squirt is Bardinii. It is a pretty rare one. And this is obviously a newer acquisition for me. So probably at some point last winter or late fall, something like that. It's putting on a new leaf, which is very sweet. This is from the Philippines, and it grows up to be a beautiful sun-stressed leaved plant. From what I understand, it's not the most prolific bloomer, but they're pretty. They're like blood red coronas. Do I have that backwards? It is. It's the blood red corona and then a kind of an orangish corolla. They're quite pretty. I think there are a couple of other species that Vermont Hoya mentions that are easier to get to bloom. I do not care. I think when you've seen an adult version of this plant, it is so beautiful that it's worth acquiring. This is an unresolved name, by the way. It was described in 1906 by Rudolf Schlechter. I think he was a German botanist that described something like 1,000 different species of plants, almost all of them orchids. This one remains an unresolved name. I cannot wait to get this one to grow up. It'll stay in the Mars Hydro tent for however long that takes, and maybe until I get it to bloom. That's what some people do, for sure. I haven't found this to be any trouble. As small as it is, I know that sounds ridiculous, but I'm sure we've all had the experience of bringing home a very small plant, and this might have, I think this had 2 leaves when I got it. So it hasn't put on tremendous growth, but you know, baby plants take a little bit to get started. And so another plant from my friend Kim at Crazy Plant Gal. Thank you, Kim. Appreciate all of the wonderful plants I've got in my collection from you. Another really unique one to consider adding to your collection. if you can find it. It is pretty rare on the US market. So anyway, what a beauty. I'll be right back. Next to last, we have the Pubicarola subspecies Anthracena. I think this used to be known as the Pubicalyx black dragon because of the gorgeous dark flowers that are just stunning. And it's a quick bloomer, though I have not had this long enough to have it bloom. This one was grown from seed, which is obviously by far the slowest way to grow a Hoya. But it is a Pubicarola, you can be sure, because there are no markings on the leaves at all. If you see any splash, period, you don't have a Pubicarola, for what that's worth. I wish this were a more common plant just for that flower, which is just absolutely incredible. This one has been grown in normal household conditions, so summer, spring, fall, winter. This one gets what it gets, except that I do have supplemental lighting and too much of it until fairly recently. You can see how small these leaves got. As a Hoya climbs and gets more light, it does not need these really large, beautiful leaves to suck up the UV rays. Obviously, grow lights don't have that. If it was in the wild, it would do that. So too much light, you're going to get these small leaves. So I have moved this so that it is getting much less light. I expect them, actually they already have started sizing up again. I'm really looking forward to getting this one to bloom this summer. This one I got from Crazy Plant Gal. It was pretty inexpensive, but it's not something that you see for sale, and it's not something people talk about. And with a flower this gorgeous, no reason not to snap one up if you get the chance. Now, the final plant of the final episode of Rare and Uncommon Hoya, coming right up. Okay, with apologies, one of my favorite plants in my collection is also the most expensive plant I own. I think, by the way, hi, this is the Sulawesiana, which is endemic to Sulawesi. No surprise there. I think you can get a one node cutting of this for like $90 plus shipping from Unsolicited Plant Talks. It ain't cheap. I think that I was doing some work for Crazy Plant Gal and was paid with a few plants. I think this was one of them, so I did not spend that kind of money on a plant. I think I do need to get it trellised. I will use a wire tower trellis for this. This has such a great backstory. This was making the social media posts like in, I think 2017 or something, and some scientists saw those posts, went and saw that out in Sulawesi, and it was, I think, found growing on trees about 15 feet up. A lot of sun, like 50–70% sun, and it was collected, and then 5 years ago it was published. So very, very new to the market. I'm sure that's part of why it's so expensive. There's just not a lot of it out there, so there's low popularity, low demand, supply and demand, imagine that. Before I get to the sun stressing, I cannot overemphasize this plant is super, super prone to root rot. And so I have it in this incredibly airy organic mixture. It's basically just cocoa husk, a little bit of bark. I've got some leca in there, and then enough cocoa coir to kind of bind it. It's one that it gets watered twice a week in the grow tent. It sits on the west shelf in my plant room in the summer. It gets watered about every 2 days. But as I was talking about in episode 3, to kind of slow down the rate of transpiration of the water, put this in a plastic cup. When I water this plant about every other time in the grow tent, every time during the summer, I soak this whole pot, and so for 20 minutes, and I really saturate the medium. And so I have not had problem with root rot. Other people report it. So I'd rather err on the side of caution, and I have the time to do that. I realize not everyone would have time to pamper a needy plant, and they may find a better way in their environment, your environment perhaps, if you find one of these, to grow it. That's what works for me. I ain't changing it because I love this plant so much. I cannot wait for it to keep growing. When I got it last summer, it was 1 node, 2 leaves. So it's done the most over the winter actually. It took quite a while to kind of get going. This is all new. I'm looking at the screen. This is all new for the winter. So definitely needs to get trellis. Feel free to leave a comment and remind me that I need to do it, because I'm going to put these plants back and promptly forget. In terms of sun stressing, 2 weeks ago these leaves were just dark green, and I did a little bit of a rearrange in the tint. I have a 240 watt bank light that's dimmed to 75%. I moved this essentially directly underneath-ish, just kind of to the side. It's sun stressed this much within a week, and it will sun stress a little bit more than this. It gets an incredibly, incredibly deep maroon, kind of like the Russell I showed earlier, but more so. This is a killer plant. I love it so much. I said in the last video that if in some unimaginable tragedy I lost all my Hoya at once, there are 3 plants that I would buy immediately to start my collection over. It would be this plant, it would be the Fusco marginata, or aka Vitellina, and it would be the really common plant, the Sunrise. And that's where I would restart my collection. I would probably start with the Sunrise because they're very inexpensive. I'll let more people buy this one, propagate it and sell it, and have the price come down to something that's more reasonable. If you feel like treating yourself, do it. If you can afford it and get this plant, why not have something this special to showcase in your collection and kind of show off to your friends, if you actually have any friends who care. I don't. But my wife loves our collection, so that's worth more than anything. Guys, that's it. Thanks for sticking around. I'm going to have another video up shortly. I hope to see you there. I hope you got some enjoyment from this. Get out there and do something kind for yourself today. I'll see you next time.